Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another topic, and the wonderful word for today is we. Now, I know I use we really in the sense of being inclusive, but I started looking a little bit about how we's actually used, and I know my wife uses we in a bunch of different ways. And I wanted to dive down a little bit into why that actually is, because there's a lot more definitions to the word we than we actually recognize. So when I say we, I think everybody knows what I mean. I mean we inclusive as far as anyone that's actually around or near me. But when my wife uses it, it's a form of negotiation, and I believe it's meant to confuse me. And the reason I think like that is because sometimes when I heard, well, before when I heard the word we, I'm thinking, what is my wife referring to? And sometimes that would end up with a problem or a challenge, and I think to myself, how did we end up here? So I'm not sure if you are aware, but if you look up in the dictionary, there are 9 different definitions for the word we. And the real question is, how is it actually used, and is it used differently between men and women? So first off, let's talk about women. So when women communicate with each other, they commonly compliment each other on how they actually look. So, oh, those are a great set of shoes, or that's a lovely color you're wearing, or that dress is awesome on you, right? But when men communicate, we don't really use that type of language. If anything, you might get some odd looks if that actually comes out of your mouth. But instead, when men actually talk to each other, we compliment each other based on things that we've done. Like, oh man, like, did you hit the gym? You look like you're tired. Or, man, like, you filled out. You've been lifting weights. I mean, we give compliments based on what folks have actually done, or again, what are characteristics about them that you can kind of give like a high five or a bump without making anyone feel uncomfortable. And all the social norms that we actually have, that's actually something important to recognize. So with that, what are the definitions? So there is this idea that you have a nominative plural of I. So the way that I understand that is when I'm talking about we, I'm talking about everyone sort of within my immediate particular group. So I believe that's the effect that I'm used to using the most. So for example, when I'm talking about my family, or when we're all, gathered around and, my wife's making us dinner, I might ask, when are we going to eat? Now, usually that doesn't happen to me because I'm busy upstairs working, but my kids will commonly ask that, when are we going to eat? So that they're using that all-inclusive. And in that particular case, they're denoting themselves and those that are in their immediate vicinity. So that one's very similar, so I didn't really see too big of a difference there. But then you actually have we for denoting people in general. So I could refer to we as a race. I could refer to we as just men in general. I could, use we in the sense of myself and anyone that was within a particular group that I'm a part of, such as maybe a team that I actually play on. So those are the common uses that I'm used to hearing and seeing. And even every now and then, again, you'll get the we, but you'll get some type of quantifier as far as like, what are you actually referring to when you say we? But what throws me off is when my wife actually uses we, and I'm not exactly sure what she's using it for until it's actually a part of a sentence. So when I looked up in the dictionary and I saw some other definitions that I'm not as familiar with, then I had an idea that, okay, my wife is more well-versed with that vocabulary word than I am. So the one that hit me the most was the royal we. Royal, right? I'm thinking royal, what does that actually mean? Well, the royal we means I, right? And in the sense, if you ever heard some of the sayings that I have, or some of the words that I have, of, we need to put the kids to bed. That is not the royal we. That is more of a, you need to put the kids to bed. Now, I got confused by that at first, but it's not the royal we, it's something different. But what my wife actually uses when she's referring to the royal we is, we have to get up to go to work in the morning. Now, since my wife actually needs to do that, I do not so much. That is something that she's using the royal we with. So all of the folks that need to get up in the morning to go to work, which would essentially be her, would be included within that royal we, but myself, I would not. So I know anytime she's using that royal we when it comes to a task, or not necessarily a task so much. If it's a task, I know it's me. Such as, we need to put the kids to bed. That means me. But in the case of the royal we, that is referring to her. So it's used in place of I in formal speech. So that's actually what's tied into her. Now, as far as the editorial we, well, we will have nothing to do with those shenanigans. That's kind of incorporating folks within a group that you're a part of or nearby, just based on principle. So that's when you essentially are avoiding being too personal or specific, and you're representing a collective viewpoint. Now, you, that's the one I was getting to, you. So when I used the example before, we need to put the kids to bed, that really means you need to put the kids to bed. And that one I hear very, very often. And I had to think, I was like, I've never really understood why she uses it that way, but again, she's using a different definition. So she's using the you definition of we, such as, we need to put the kids to bed. You need to put the kids to bed. So I'm just like, all right, I'm getting it now. I'm starting to understand. And then there's a few other forms of it, such as the predicate with a copulative verb. Don't worry about that so much. Or the apposition with a noun. Just to give you some examples of what that means. It is we who should thank you, right? That's another version of it. Don't worry about that too much. And we Americans are a sturdy lot. Again, these are just examples of sentences that I'm throwing out there. But don't hear that much either. But the ones that I will tie into that I think every man should know, especially with a significant other, is the royal we. You have to know what that means and when it's used. The editorial we, such as a collective viewpoint that sort of includes everything, sometimes whether you want it or not. And then the idea of you. Now, you never really think of we functioning that way, but that's exactly how it functions. And I wanted to put a little test together to see how you actually do. So, I wanted you to identify what type, and we'll just use the three types. We'll use the royal we, we'll use the editorial we, which is, again, collective and inclusive, and we'll use you. So, first test. Do we have a game tonight? All right. Do we have a game tonight? Now, if you came up with you are correct, because this is something my wife usually asks me. And what I believe that means is you and your little friends, right? So that's kind of what I understand is the we. Do we have a game tonight? All right, number 2. We have to go to work in the morning. We have to go to work in the morning. Which we is that? Very good. That is the royal we. So, if it is an excuse, it's hers alone, but that royal we is not really talking about you. It's talking about her. All right, number 3. We are going to have a wonderful all-expenses vacation. This is one's a little bit of a trick. What it really could mean is that your wife is going by herself, your wife is going with a friend, and just maybe, your wife is going to decide to bring you along. But that's no guarantee of anything. So proceed with caution with that one. All right. We need to leave a nice tip. You, very good. That's a you. We need to leave a nice tip. Now, she may actually ask you to calculate it, but in addition to calculating it, you might actually want to leave it as well. And then last but not least, we need to talk to your son about the birds and the bees. Ah, that's another you. Also you. So again, wanted to go through that quick test to see how you did. Hopefully you did pretty well. The biggest thing is you always want to assume the worst and hope for the best. So anytime your wife or significant other decides to use we in a sentence, assume that means you first, right? Assume that means you first. Then, actually, no, let me take that. Actually, yes. Assume that first. Assume it means you first. But if it is a reason not to do something, assume it's the royal we, which means it's them. It's her or him or whoever it actually is. Right? So, worst case, if there's a task associated with it, it's you. And if there's no task associated with it, but it's more of an excuse not to do something, it's them. And then the last case, the editorial we or the collective we, you kind of leave that on the back burner and you pull that in as like a second or third stringer. But that's essentially how everything comes together. So with that got me talking about languages and language patterns, and whew, I know there's one, and I might have to save this one for another episode, but does this dress make me look fat? That's the question. If you see it the same way that I do, you know how dangerous of a question that is. And there's a certain way to understand and to address that, because yes, there is a right answer and a wrong answer. You may not want to answer honestly, but I'm not going to go too deep into that one. Let's save that one for another episode. So I appreciate you tuning in to We. Hopefully you have a much better understanding of how we actually works. And if you didn't, just consider that. Consider that. You could be in very good graces in using it well and understanding it well. And you may be in a little bit of trouble if you don't use it well. So hopefully that little pointer helped you out for today, and hope to catch you on the next episode. All right. Bye.